threats of human trafficking, with particular emphasis on forced labor, child labor, baby factories, and organ harvesting. So let me start with the story. Last year, April, we got a complaint from a father who also visited our office. You know, he was very confused, very irate. And he said they had been looking for their daughter. The daughter just disappeared for 3 months. They didn't know where she was. And this is a girl in a private university in Abuja. And you know, in Nigeria, if your parents can afford to send you to a private university, you come from a somewhat comfortable home, right? So for 3 months, they didn't know where she was. And all of a sudden, she called her father, and she was calling from Ghana. And she said she had been trafficked to Ghana. She was forced into prostitution. So the father reached out to us. We now reached out to our counterpart agency in Ghana called the Economic Organized Crime Office in Ghana. And they liaised with the law enforcement agency in Ghana. And I think in June, she was rescued. 3 days after she was rescued, she was repatriated back to Nigeria. And the reason why I share this story, because this is a hall full of young people. This is a hall full of students. And I think it is very important for you all to understand the dimensions, the different dimensions of human trafficking. So what this story, apparently she met this guy on Instagram. She was literally catfished. And I'm sure some of you know what it means to be catfished. Catfishing involves when someone sets up a fake account on social media, whether on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter, and they pretend to be somebody else and they catfish you. So this girl was catfished by this guy who promised her a modeling job in Ghana. So she abandoned her studies in school and went to Ghana hoping to be a model, but of course it wasn't a modeling job that was waiting for her. It was something else. So what this story illustrates is how the crime of human trafficking has evolved. So it's no longer how it used to be, the traditional way that we know it to be. Also, young people at all levels are at risk. So traditionally, it used to be young people from rural areas or urban poor communities. But with the story of Abigail, you can see that all young people are at all levels are at risk. And also, traffickers now operate online as much as they operate offline, as in the case of Abigail. And we saw this shift with the COVID-19 pandemic when the world was locked down and everyone was at home. So as you were at home, traffickers were also at home looking for how to lure people online. And also, the internet has no geographical boundary. So traffickers are now able to access a wider pool of potential victims. So to put in perspective, every year thousands of people travel across the world to search for a better life, and amongst these people are victims of human trafficking. Human trafficking is one of the most serious human rights violations and the second most profitable criminal enterprise in the world after drug trafficking. Human trafficking is a $150 billion global enterprise. The 2023 Global Slavery Index that was released just a few weeks ago, was released on the 23rd of May, estimates that 50 million people were living in modern slavery at any given day in 2021. So this is an increase of 10 million people since 2016. And this is a report that is put together by the International Labour Organization and also International Organization for Migration and an organization called Work Free. Now, more than 12 million of all people in modern day slavery are children, and women and girls account for over half of them, that is 54%. So the report states that it is estimated that 1.6 million people are living in modern day slavery in Nigeria. However, we all know that human trafficking happens on the ground and behind closed doors. So it is extremely difficult to accurately calculate the number of people trafficked worldwide, hence the estimation. Now, to fully appreciate this session is to understand exactly what human trafficking is. In simple terms, of course, human trafficking is the movement of persons from one place to another for the sole purpose of exploitation. In technical terms, however, human trafficking is the recruitment, the transportation, the transfer, the harboring, and the receipt of persons. And this could be through the means of deceit, it could be through the means of fraud, it could mean through the means of coercion, payment of money, abuse of power, or also taking advantage of the vulnerability of somebody for the sole purpose of exploitation. So from the definition itself, you can see that the crime of human trafficking is an entire value chain. So you have people who act as recruiters, you have people who act as transporters, you also have the brokers, then you have the ultimate trafficker, who are those that receive and feed off people for years and for years. So the recruitment is usually deceitful, and most victims are lured by false promises, like I shared in the case of Abigail. Some are even escorted by families, while others are trapped out of greed, knowing the implications of the action, but you want to go and try your luck, so you keep trying. So for an act to qualify as human trafficking, it must have key 3 elements. So the act, what is done, which is the recruitment, transportation, harboring and things like that. Then you have the means, how it's done. So through the use of deceit, fraud, and all sorts of coercion. Then the purpose, why it's done, for the sole purpose of exploitation. Now, while most people have an intuitive understanding of human trafficking, it is important to distinguish between human trafficking. The acting DCG talked about smuggling of migrants, and we now have the third one, which is irregular migration. So people often use this concept interchangeably. You see somebody who is being smuggled, they say the person is being trafficked, or somebody who is trapped in an irregular migratory situation, and they say that person was being trafficked. So to better understand the forced migration ecosystem is to comprehend what this concept really means. So we have human trafficking, which is the crime against the person and an abuse of their human rights, and also a crime against the state. So it is deliberate exploitation of human beings. Victims have not consented to be exploited, whether or not they are legally in the country. And trafficking can apply internally, like we do in Nigeria, or international movement, like we also see in Nigeria. Now, migrant smuggling. This is a crime against the state, and it happens when somebody facilitates the entry of another into a country of which that person is not a national or a resident for a financial gain. So you have people who want to, okay, I want to go to Italy. You now seek out a smuggler, you pay that smuggler, you enter into an agreement with that smuggler. So the relationship between that person being smuggled and the smuggler is transactional. So, so there are instances where smugglers often put smuggled migrants in dangerous situations, which may lead them to be victims of other crimes during the smuggling process. So when that happens, automatically that smuggled migrant now becomes the victim of trafficking. Then we have irregular migration, and this can be defined as a migratory movement that takes place outside the regulatory frameworks of the transit or destination countries. For instance, you get a valid visa, you go into a country, you overstay on a visa, you become an irregular migrant, or you enter a country with fake documents, you become, that is you working outside the migratory framework of that particular country. Or you go with a valid visa, probably you go with a student visa, and it categorically states that you are not supposed to work with the student visa, then you decide to work with the student visa. So that is you working outside the migratory framework of that particular country. So I shared some, I thought this was projecting. Is it projecting? Okay, yes. So I just wanted to share some photos. So these are photos of migrants trying to be smuggled. You can see that in this particular car, they put in special compartment where the person is being smuggled. So these are things, these are antics that people use to get smuggled from wherever country. And like the DVC admin said, no one is saying you shouldn't migrate, but if you must do it, you do it the right way. Because most systems are set up to lock you out. So take for instance the American system. You go into America and you become an irregular migrant. You can't go to school, you can't open a bank account, you can't even get a job. So you are left relying on people. So already you've put yourself in a position to be exploited. Then you can see this little girl in a suitcase, wanting to be trafficked to where, I really don't know, or smuggled to where, I really don't know. Then the other guy, I just wanted to share these photos. Now, what are the different forms of human trafficking? We have sexual exploitation, which obviously is the biggest industry in the world. We have forced labor, debt bondage, child labor, domestic servitude. This is where you use underage children to work in the home. You have buying and selling of human beings, which is something in the past year and a half, we've seen a lot of buying and selling of children in Nigeria. Then of course, organ removal, then we have slavery and all slavery-like activities. So what are the key drivers of human trafficking? The most obvious is social economic factors, poverty, lack of jobs, and educational opportunities. So of course, social economic factors is the driver of the Japa syndrome. We have socio-political factors, which is internal conflict and insecurity. We have familiar greed and peer pressure. So, for instance, when someone tells you, oh, they have a better, they have a better life for you somewhere else, and you don't even ask questions, you don't do your research, you just immediately jump at it and you start thanking God for giving you a helper, instead of you to go and ask questions and do your own research before you take it. Or if you are a university dropout and somebody tells you, oh, they have an equivalent of $500,000 job for you, and you know that you don't even have the qualification that matches what is being offered for you. You see the red flags, but you ignore those red flags and you still go. So this is why we say familial greed, because we actually see parents trafficking their own parents, whether their own children, whether directly or indirectly. We have cases where sisters traffic their own sisters, uncles trafficking their own nieces and nephews. So it's insane. Then of course, peer pressure. When you spend your entire destiny on social media, you are going through somebody's Instagram page or Facebook page, and you want to live the kind of life that person is living, without even knowing what that person does for a living. Then we also have, I talk ignorance on the part of families and children at the risk involved. Someone tells you that they are going to take you to Spain, but no one tells you that you have to go by road through the Seme borders or through Jibia border in Katsina. No one will tell you that you have to go through Agadez in Niger. No one tells you that you have to cross the Sahara Desert. And no one tells you that when you eventually get to Libya, you have to swim across the Mediterranean Sea to the other side. No one tells you that. Then we have, of course, porous borders. I think according to the Ministry of Interior, it provides that Nigeria has about 84 legal land borders and over 1,490 illegal land borders. So you can imagine the hundreds of people that pass through these porous borders every day. Then finally, we have supply and demand for high demand for cheap labor, cheap goods, commercial sex, and the likes of it. So what is the legal framework for combating trafficking in persons in Nigeria? We have the United Nations Convention on Transnational Organized Crime and its and its protocol. So we have three different protocols. We have the one on trafficking in persons, we have the one on smuggling of migrants, and we have the one on illegal arms. It was adopted in the year 2000. It came into force in the year 2003. Nigeria signed Aictoc in 2000 and ratified in 2001. Nigeria enacted the Trafficking in Persons Prohibition Law Enforcement and Administration Act in 2003. And this act created Naptip as a law enforcement agency in Nigeria. Naptip is actually the foremost anti-human trafficking law enforcement agency in Africa. So we had a lot of African countries coming to Nigeria to understudy Naptip and now go back and establish one, and the latest being Sierra Leone. So in terms of our operational structure, we have offices in 32 states in Nigeria. We only have 4 states where we don't have offices, and that is in Bauchi, in Delta, Niger, and in Kogi. We also operate shelters, so we have 13 shelters across Nigeria. So we carry out our work based on 5-pronged approaches of prevention, protection, prosecution, partnership, and policy. So all measures have to be applied simultaneously. No one measure is more important than the other. Then I just wanted to share our work in 2022. So in 2022, we received a total of 1,440 cases were reported to us, out of which 412 were external trafficking cases, and we had 1,028 internal trafficking cases. Last year, we were able to secure 80 convictions, which is the highest in a single year since the inception of Naptip. And we had 45 males and 35 women, females. So you see, women too are coming up in the food chain when it has to do with human trafficking. And already in 2023, as at today, we've secured 39 convictions. So cumulatively, since the first conviction was secured by Naptip in 2004, we have secured a total of 615 convictions. And we currently have 262 ongoing cases in various courts across the country. We also rescued 2,743 victims. We rescued 1,454 female adults, 688 female minors, 363 male adults, and 233 male minors. We had, for victims of inward trafficking, so victims who were trafficked into Nigeria were 45. Then for returned victims, that's victims that were returned from abroad, we had 251. Then intercepted victims, like the acting DCG said, we work together. In fact, we have a very fantastic relationship with the Nigerian Immigration Service. So most times when victims are intercepted, they hand over these victims to Naptip, and not just the victims, they also hand over suspects to us for prosecution. So for intercepted victims at various border points, we had 1,484. Then Benue State had the highest number of rescued victims last year, followed by Ondo, and then we had Oyo. So let's look at some of the select forms of human trafficking, shall we? So I'll be looking at forced labor, child labor, baby factory, and organ trafficking. So for forced labor, victims of this widespread form of trafficking comes primarily from urban areas and rural areas rather, and urban poor communities. And victims are usually recruited and trafficked using deception and commission into slavery-like jobs. Like, you may ask, what categorizes as a slavery-like job? When you work for 20 hours or you work for 22 hours a day, what is that? That is slavery in itself. And we see a lot of that. So you have a lot of people that are engaged in agricultural, mining. We've rescued a number of underage children that work in farms and also in construction work. I know last year in Enugu, we had to seal a building that was using underage children to work construction. Then, of course, domestic servitude and other labor-intensive jobs. So the Section 22 of the Naptip Act criminalizes the use of any person for forced labor within or outside Nigeria. So you use somebody for forced labor in Nigeria, or you now recruit them and move them out of Nigeria. So it covers both internal and external. Or any person that permits any place or premises to be used for the purpose of forced labor. And this is punishable with the imprisonment of not less than 5 years. So if you have a judge who is very strict, you can get up to the maximum, and a fine of not less than 1 million naira. So what this section means is any person who participates in engaging a person in forced labor is liable. So that applies to recruiters, so that applies to transporters or harborers or receivers, and even those who hire out. So all these middlemen and agents. I know that Nigeria will now use agents to get domestic help. So everybody, including you, that you're patronizing that agent, you're also culpable. And if you allow your premises to be used for forced labor, you are equally liable. On Friday, we received an email from somebody who was recruited for work in another country. Let me just share what the email. So from the level of the email, you can tell the level of educational background of that person. So the person said, good afternoon. So this mail was sent to one of our social media handles. I am so from, I'm not going to name the country. My agent lied to me to enter this country. He told me I would get a restaurant job, but when I get here, so that's, I'm not going to, edit. So when I get here, I find out it was a housemaid job. I decided to take it, but sir, it's very hard for me. They beat me at the office, they locked me in the toilet. The last boss house I went, he wanted to rape me. So rape, she didn't spell it well, wanted to rape me, and we had issues. He brought me back to the office. They beat me and said, I am calling government to lock their company. They said they will kill me here, sir. But save me, sir. Please help me, sir. So this is an email that we got from a Nigerian woman from the southwest just on Friday. And this is just one of the hundreds that we get all the time, which is why we say nobody is saying you shouldn't migrate. But if you must migrate, do the right thing, do your homework. The grass is only as green as you water it. So you thinking that anywhere else is better than Nigeria, then you are in for a shocker. So child labor, section 23 of our act states that employment of a child under 12 years as domestic worker is a crime. So any person who employs, requires, recruits, transports, harbors, receives or hires out commits a crime. So it's not enough for you to say, oh, I was not the one that transported that person, or I was not the one that recruited that person. As long as you received and you required that child to work in your house, you are also culpable. And the section further provides that in addition to the prescribed punishment, where such a child is used for work that is exploitative, injurious, or hazardous to the physical, social, and psychological development of that child, you get an additional minimum of 2 years, but not exceeding 7 years. So you go to jail without an option of fine. I remember, I think a few weeks ago, so this is something I usually do at the office. I just go around offices, go around the premises and just see what is going on. So I saw different groups of people that were just standing there waiting for their different investigation officers. So I decided to, like a small village meeting, okay, sir, what's your problem? Madam, what's your problem? And one of the suspects that was standing there was accused of using her house help to fetch 36 buckets of water every day. And the girl is like 11-year-old. You can imagine a group of accused people. Everybody standing there, they're all guilty. But everybody looked at the woman like, you are a witch. Like, me, I know I'm bad, but I cannot be this bad. You know? 36 buckets of water. An 11-year-old girl. So these are the kind of things that we see. So the Act order says that where the child is denied payment, so this is where you are paying agents. You have an underage girl, she's doing the work that she's not supposed to do, and you are now paying an agent. That one is another extra, not less than 2 years imprisonment. So the punishment is just compounding. Then where the child is also defiled or she has infliction of bodily harm, because we see a lot of that. Our shelter, especially our shelters in Abuja, where domestic helps are being raped by the men in the house. So it now carries another extra penalty. And we've seen people who, like, how would I even say, these 4 elements we have investigated and they've committed this entire 4 elements. So it's something that I think we should all reflect as individuals. I know that if I take a pool of people here in this hall, and I know we have not less than 100 people that have underage people working in their homes, but let's leave it at that. So child labor in itself is a huge problem in Nigeria, and children from other West African countries are also trafficked into Nigeria for exploitative work and vice versa, especially children from Niger, from Togo, and also from Benin Republic. And obviously our laws in Nigeria regarding minimum age for employment is not consistent, and this is something that we must harmonize if we intend to tackle this problem. So let's look at baby factory. I know so many people here will be interested in baby factory because we always hear about baby factory. And even though our act does not categorically address issues of baby factory, however, baby factory is a form of sexual exploitation and buying and selling of human beings. So young girls are trafficked within communities and across state lines for this purpose. And these factories tend to operate as maternity homes. You see fake maternity homes, you see fake herbal homes, and also they tend to operate as rehabilitation centers and orphanages. So we've had reports of women and girls being held captive to deliver babies who are now then sold illegally. And some of these girls and women are lured from different parts of the country with the promise of employment, but they are now held in captivity and raped repeatedly until they get pregnant. It's really, really insane. So, and we also see that people prey on pregnant teenage girls. They lure them, tend to care about them, and once they give birth, they collect these babies from them and they sell them. Last year, we recovered a 2-year-old baby for an 18-year-old girl. So at the time she got pregnant, she was 16, and that was during COVID. So of course she was pregnant. She didn't want her parents to know. You know how parents can be when you tell your female daughter, if you ever bring any unwanted pregnancy to my house, I will kill you. So that was what happened to the girl. The girl was pregnant. She was scared to tell her parents. So she kept on tying her stomach just to conceal the situation. So the only person that was aware of her true situation was her older sister. So luckily, I would say luckily for her, her mom traveled to another state to go see the father. Then lockdown happened. So lockdown happened. She was I think it was about when she was 8 months old. The sister now, through asking people questions, they now referred her to some place in Abuja and told her that she could go there, they would care for her, and she would give birth. So she said when she went there, the woman told her that they wanted to buy her baby, and she categorically told them that she wasn't going to sell her baby. And this is a 16-year-old girl, so consent really doesn't matter when it has to do with issues like this. Even if the girl said, yes, you can buy my baby, it really doesn't matter because she's a child. Fast forward, she gives birth, they collect this child from her, even though repeatedly she cried and said she wanted her baby back, they didn't give it to her. And I think she said whether the woman just gave her 10,000 naira or so. and told her to go. That was how she left. Then it was January last year when the mother was now telling her that okay, you have to get ready, school and all that. So she went to meet the mom and she said that she didn't want to go to school. The mother was like, why? And she was like, I want my baby back. The mother was like, baby? Which baby? When did you give birth? So the long story short, they ended up in Naptip and we arrested this woman. We detained her. At first she was like, oh, she didn't know anything about it. So I told my officers, I said, this woman is not going anywhere until she produces this baby. And we're not playing with her. She remained in our detention for, I think, about a week. After which she now confessed that yes, she sold the baby. She sold the baby to somebody in Benin. So we said she should bring that baby. So they dispatched the baby like, when you are dispatching items. So they dispatched the baby, and the person that eventually brought the baby to our office in Abuja, we also arrested the guy. So we kept the baby with us. We now conducted a DNA test. But if you see the baby and you see the 18-year-old girl, you don't even need a DNA test to tell you that that was her baby. But we did a DNA test and it matched. So right now, the case is in court and the woman is in Kuje. So we are trying it just to send a very strong message to people. And it is mostly women that are perpetrators of this kind of crime. So for years, Naptip and other law enforcement agencies have been busting and shutting down baby factories across the country, rescuing pregnant victims and babies, but the problem still persists, and that tells you that it's a societal problem. So there's definitely a clear link between this phenomenon called cryptic pregnancy and baby factories. Just show of hands, how many people here have heard about the term cryptic pregnancy? Show of hands. Okay, just a few. So cryptic pregnancy is where a woman pretends to be pregnant for 9 months. Then after 9 months, she shows up with the baby. Or like there was a case that we handled of a woman who actually thought she was pregnant. So she was going to this maternity home and they were giving her all sorts of herbs. She was drinking, she had signs of being pregnant, and her stomach was actually, growing bigger. Then 9 months, and usually how these maternity homes operate, when you go there, you pay some sum of money, then they'll keep giving you the concoction, the rubbish concoction. Then they'll tell you that they'll give you a particular date, that is the day you give birth. And they tell you that when you want to give birth, you have to come to that maternity home. So what they do is, when you go there, you're like, okay, pretending to be in labor, they already have a baby that they will switch and give you. So we've seen this happen over and over and over again. The women that pretend to be pregnant, meanwhile they are already arranging a baby. Then 9 months you show up with your baby and your neighbors will be like, everybody will be congratulating you, not knowing that you procured a baby. So organ trafficking. We know that organ trafficking is facilitated by the global shortage in organs for ethical transplants, which has created a thriving business for organized criminal groups. Victims are often adults due to their fully formed developed organs, and young adults due to their gullibility. And we know that it is widespread but difficult to report because victims are usually very poor or willing participants. So they feel like, okay, since I participated in this, I'm scared or I'm ashamed to come and report, forgetting that the law is there to protect you because the law is clear about the crime. For a poor person, the recruiter or the recipient probably took advantage of that person's vulnerable position in making them sell their organs. So for willing participants, there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation around selling one organs. So the recruiters or brokers often tell gullible participants that, oh, don't worry, as an adult, you only need one organ to survive, or you only need one kidney to survive. And people actually believe that. And they also tell people that, oh, don't worry, when you donate your organ, it will grow back. So there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation out there regarding the selling or donation of organs. And you know, that if the willing participant had gotten the full picture, there is 99.9 possibility that that willing participant won't agree to selling their organs. Because, see, we all love life. Everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die. So the fact that that person is poor, that person is vulnerable, does not mean that person does not want life. So most times, people just lie. They use deceit to make, to entice people to sell their organs. So traffickers target communities with people in vulnerable situations and coerce them into selling their organs to improve their economic situations. And migrants are often targets in transit and destination countries as shared by returnees, especially in Libya, where you don't have any more money to give your smuggler. And the smuggler will say, okay, I can fetch you for some money, you know, from your kidney, and you go and sell your kidney. So section 20 of the TPIA Act, that's our act, defines organ trafficking as when a person through force, deception, or any form of coercion abuse a position of power or abuses a vulnerable situation or gives money or benefits in order to induce or obtain the consent of a person for the purpose of removing their organs. And that person is liable to imprisonment for a term of not less than 7 years. So you can go to prison for life imprisonment and a fine of not less than 5 million. So the judge can make you pay a fine of 500 million or even 1 billion. So the section further provides that any person who assists in any way in the removal of human organs or in the buying and selling of human organs is equally liable. So this applies to doctors, nurses, lab technicians, and facilitators and brokers. You that identify that poor person in the village, they are also liable. And the same punishment also applies to any person who enlists, you transport, or you deliver, or you accommodate, or takes in another person under the age of 18. So you can see that the section differentiates between a child and an adult. So let me end by sharing our 2022 geographical prevalence of trafficking in persons across Nigeria, which obviously is not static. It changes year by year. So for North Central, we have a lot of domestic servitude, forced labor, bonded labor, and foreign travel for sexual exploitation. For the Northeast, we see a lot of domestic servitude, orphanage trafficking, buying and selling of children. For the Northwest, we see a lot of domestic servitude, sale of babies, and child labor. For the South, we see a lot of domestic servitude, buying and selling of children, bonded labor, trafficking through waterways to Burkina Faso, and sexual exploitation. For the Southeast, we see a lot of domestic servitude, baby factories, cryptic pregnancies, buying and selling of children, urban to urban and rural to urban trafficking in persons for sexual exploitation. We see a lot of foreign travel for sexual exploitation. For the Southwest, we see a lot of domestic servitude. We see a lot of forced labor. We also see a lot of foreign travel for sexual exploitation and foreign travel for labor exploitation. In the past 1 year, most of the reports, complaints, and rescues we've made for the Middle East are actually women from either Oyo, Ondo, and Ekiti. It's actually a serious problem in the Southwest. Then for the FCT, we see a lot of orphanage trafficking in sports, where young people are told they have an opportunity in playing in an international club, but meanwhile they are trafficked for anything other than sports. Then also child exploitation. We've seen a lot of child pornography, so child sexual assault materials on the internet, and also issues of sextortion. The use of children for alms begging, where people rent out their babies to be used to beg. We see that a lot in the FCT. So let me end by just saying that human trafficking happens in plain sight. It is far more prevalent, complex, and close to home than most of us realize, and we all need to pay attention. We need to make the decision that tells us who we are as a person, as a people, and as a society, because we are all implicated in this problem. So it's not just Naptip problem, it's not just the government of Nigeria problem, it is all our problem. So although the 2023 Global Slavery report estimates that 1.6 million people are living in modern slavery in Nigeria, the same report also states, and I quote, Nigeria, so this was the report I talked about that was released on the 23rd of May, this past May. So it says, Nigeria is outperforming its neighbors in its efforts to address modern day slavery risk in the country. Nigeria has the strongest response to modern slavery in Nigeria, reflecting strong criminal justice mechanisms to address modern slavery, as well as steps taken to support survivors, address risk factors, and coordinate the response, including by launching a new national action plan on trafficking in person. And by the way, this action plan was approved by the Federal Executive Council in February of 2022. So my takeaway from this report and what it says about Nigeria is that recognizing the enormity of a problem, or recognizing the enormity of human trafficking, as it were, in Nigeria, and the ability to tackle same is extremely important, which is why in the past year and a half, we have been able to enhance the visibility of Naptip as well as make our data accessible, which is why if you read the Nigerian country study of the report, the data that was frequently referenced was Naptip data and not a country data, and this is because our data are not harmonized, and other agencies working in this space are not making their data equally accessible. Because I believe that if we have a more harmonized data at a country level, we'll see more traction. So we need to continue to make our data and information accessible, because if we don't tell our own story, we're giving somebody else the power to shape our country's narrative by telling their own version of what they think our story is. If a tree falls in the forest and doesn't make a sound, did it really fall? So we need to take control of telling the Nigerian story from our own perspective. Thank you very much.
Please keep clapping. Make it much louder for her. Thank you very much. Mouse. Prof.